people from getting around here in Amsterdam the same way they do elsewhere. But while the city has more canals than even Venice, it's much easier to get from point A to point B here thanks to its more than 1,300 bridges. The easiest and most popular form of transportation around here is the bicycle. There are thousands of them everywhere you look. With Amsterdam's relatively mild winters, it's possible to bike all year round. And since the city was built at sea level, there are no steep hills for cyclists to climb. Enormous parking lots are built for bikes only, like this one, right next to the central train station. Amsterdam is built according to a unique model of urban planning. Its 16th century houses give it a classical, romantic feel that attracts millions of tourists. But it's also home to some audacious, ultra-modern constructions that give the city a contemporary flavor. French singer Jacques Brel earned his fame singing about the Port of Amsterdam. As for us, we're heading not to the port, but to the marina. It's time to board the Lafayette, a member of Croisi Europe's luxurious fleet. The floating hotel that will be our home over the next few days is 90 meters long, 10 meters wide, and can accommodate 84 passengers. We're greeted by the onboard staff who take the time to answer all our questions before handing out our cabin key cards. It's a warm and friendly beginning to our European river adventure. We have a bit of time now to settle into our rooms. The ship's 44 cabins are all exceptionally comfortable and bright, and the panoramic windows will give us an excellent view of the gorgeous riverbank scenery. All of your desires have been anticipated. Your cruise will unfold in the most comfortable conditions available. The rooms are furnished with a large double bed that can separate into two. Passengers have access to a climate control system, an HD television, a safe, a hairdryer, a radio, and a telephone, and the bathroom is particularly well designed. After settling into our cabins, we head to the upper deck lounge to have a drink at the bar and meet our new travel companions. This is a good opportunity to form new friendships, to chat about past traveling experiences, and to discuss what's in store in the next few days. By late afternoon, everyone is on board, and we gather to partake in the traditional welcome cocktail.
Mesdames et messieurs, alors je me présente, je m'appelle Aïkal, le commandant du Lafayette, et en tant que tel, je tiens à vous souhaiter la bienvenue à bord. Le bateau Lafayette est à une longueur de 90 mètres.
After the captain's speech, we're introduced to the team that will be looking after us for the next several days. Once the introductions are over, we sit down to find out what the chef has in store for us. For the first meal on our cruise, an appetizer of duck pâté with leek fondue, followed by chicken saltimbocca with buttered tagliatelle, and for dessert, peach mousse supreme with apricot coulis. The overwhelming response of the passengers, compliments to the chef. It's absolutely delicious. The nicest way to digest this excellent meal is with a stroll through the city to take in the Amsterdam nightlife. This is the moment we truly understand why the city is seen as one of the most romantic destinations in Europe. Walking along the canals, the timeless atmosphere has us feeling like we're in another era. We'll continue our exploration of Amsterdam in broad daylight, right after the break. The sun rises on the Amsterdam marina. On board, the passengers start their day slowly in the main dining room. We have to fuel up before we head out to explore the Dutch capital. Now's the time to indulge in a hearty breakfast. Coffee, tea, fruit, yogurt, and pastries. Both sweet and savory dishes. You'll find everything you need to satisfy your morning appetite. The mood is relaxed, the sun is shining, and an exciting day lies ahead. When everyone is ready, we get on a bus and head into the city center. Throughout the cruise, we're lucky to be accompanied by guides with intimate knowledge of our destination cities. They are true experts, specialists in local history, and they have dozens of anecdotes to share about the places we visit. First stop, Muntplein, or Mint Square, in the shadow of the Munttoren, or Mint Tower. Dating from the late 15th century, the tower was built to defend one of the medieval city gates. Its current name dates from the 17th century, when a large part of the Netherlands was occupied by the French army. As gold and silver could not be safely transported through the country, coins were minted in Amsterdam, right in this tower. Not far away is the Bloemenmarkt, the city's famous flower market. The flower trade is one of Holland's oldest traditions, making this 19th century market a stop that shouldn't be missed. What makes it special? All of the shops are on boats moored along a canal called the Singel. If you want an original souvenir that will bloom in your yard to remind you of your travels, this is where you'll find a wide selection to choose from. We continue our stroll along the Singel Canal and end up at the door to one of Amsterdam's best-kept secrets, the Begijnhof. It's a large inner courtyard surrounded by 14th century houses. The Begijnhof was originally a residence for the Beguines, a religious order of women that existed throughout Northern Europe. Beguine complexes are generally similar in structure, including chapels, residences, and workshops used by the inhabitants. We head for Roken Canal, where we glimpse the equestrian statue of Queen Wilhelmina. She had the longest reign of any Dutch monarch, lasting from 1890 to 1948. Amsterdam has always been a city of international trade. For over 400 years, it has been a hub of the European diamond trade, along with the Belgian city of Antwerp. A good way to find out more about the mysterious diamond industry, which handles hundreds of millions of dollars every year, is to visit a diamond factory. Welcome to Gassan, one of the few factories that allows visitors to observe every step of the diamond cutting process. The factory employees are part of a long tradition of diamond cutting. The first diamond cutters appeared in Amsterdam in the late 16th century. Then, in the 18th century, major diamond deposits were discovered in Brazil, which was then a Portuguese colony. An Amsterdam company negotiated with the King of Portugal to gain a monopoly on the Brazilian diamonds, marking the beginning of the golden age of the Dutch diamond industry. During the visit, artisans described the work that goes into each meticulous task. They cut dozens of facets on each stone, some of which are minuscule. The value of a diamond is not based only on the rarity and purity of the rough stone, but also on the work of these artists who create small works of art every day. The Gassan factory is our last stop this morning in the Dutch capital. Back on our vessel, we take a well-deserved break before sitting down for lunch. Tucking into a tasty meal, we share our impressions of our morning in Amsterdam. The passengers are starting to get to know each other, and a friendly atmosphere reigns in the dining room. In the early afternoon, we hop on a bus and head west. We're off to visit Haarlem, situated a half-hour drive from central Amsterdam. Founded in the 13th century, it's an ancient city that has preserved evidence of its rich past. Buildings dating from the medieval period give a unique flavor to this city, which is home to a population of 150,000 and famous for its easygoing pace. The central square is the oldest place in Haarlem. This is where the ancient counts of Holland organized jousting tournaments for their knights. It's also the site of Haarlem City Hall and the Sint Babbelkerk Cathedral, which was consecrated in 1559. In addition to its regular masses, the church also hosts concerts that highlight its internationally renowned pipe organ. Walking past the Taylor Museum and the Frans Hals Museum, as well as an array of concert halls, art galleries, and exhibition spaces, we realize that we're in a city that gives pride of place to its arts and culture. Its unique architecture is also regularly used as background for films and TV shows, including Ocean's 12, starring George Clooney and Brad Pitt. As the afternoon draws to a close, the passengers gather on board the ship for the actual cruise departure. We're leaving the Dutch capital tonight and heading for Germany, navigating 72 kilometers up the Amsterdam Canal to the Rhine River. Once we're out of the city, the scenery changes radically. We're in the quiet countryside where we get our first taste of pastoral serenity. After supper, the passengers gather to spend the evening together. The onboard staff have several activities planned for us. Some passengers play games, while others prefer to dance or feel the night air on the upper deck. Tomorrow, we'll pay a visit to Wiesel in Germany and to Aachen right after the break. We're comfortably settled on board for a romantic cruise from the Netherlands to Switzerland. We left Amsterdam yesterday evening, and after sailing all night, we're arriving in Germany's Ruhr region. We'll be docking in Wiesel later today. As there's no excursion planned before then, we have ample time to eat a hearty breakfast. These long periods traveling up the river are perfect for taking in the sights of the Rhine Valley and for indulging our inner photographer. Some passengers write postcards home, while others prefer to lounge in the sun and admire the view. The go-getters among us take part in a morning exercise session on the upper deck. In the early afternoon, the ship docks at the Wiesel wharf. A bus is ready to take us on a German adventure into Aachen. We'll spend about an hour getting there, as the city is a fair distance from the Rhine, on the border between Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium. Aachen is a historic town with a past dating back to Roman times and then raised to greatness by Emperor Charlemagne. The Romans were the first ones to take advantage of the many hot springs in the area, building several thermal baths. The sulfurous waters maintain a steady temperature of 74 degrees, and their healing properties attract many people who come to take the waters. The Elisenbrunnen was built around a hot spring in the early 1800s. Today, it is one of Aachen's most famous landmarks. Marble tablets tell us of the famous visitors that have come to take the waters, including composer George Frederick Handel and Giacomo Casanova, the famous seducer. But the most important person ever to call Aachen home must have been Emperor Charlemagne, who made it the capital of his empire in the late 8th century, after having rebuilt and enlarged the palace of his father, Pippin the Short. He had a barracks and a hospital built in Aachen and founded a school that attracted scholars to the city. In the 14th century, a new city hall was built on the foundations of the emperor's palace, which had been destroyed by invaders. This building was severely damaged by the Great Fire of 1665, and Baroque flourishes were added during reconstruction. Charlemagne dreamed of making Aachen into a new Rome. In the 19th century, he began work on a great cathedral, which took almost 1,000 years to complete. The structure shows evidence of all the architectural styles that were developed as it was being built. Using a small bronze model, our guide points out the various styles used in the different stages of its construction. We continue our stroll through the historic city center. As the city is built on top of a series of springs, we walk past many interesting-looking fountains, including the Puppenbrunnen, or Puppet Fountain. Each of the fountain's figures represents a person who played an important role in the city's history. We get back on our bus and head for Dusseldorf, where our ship awaits. After the bus ride, the onboard staff hands out cocktails that really hit the spot. We'll spend the evening docked in Dusseldorf and then navigate all night toward our next point of call. For now, we're curious as to what the kitchen has in store for us. And once again, we must admit that we're being spoiled. The food is delicious, and the passengers partake in a relaxed and friendly atmosphere. We'll weigh anchor at 3 in the morning to continue up the Rhine toward our next destination of Cologne. After a good night's sleep, we arrive at one of the oldest major cities in Germany. A light rain is falling over the city, but it doesn't dampen our spirits. We head out to explore the Roman and medieval ruins that are found throughout the city. Once we've disembarked, our ship heads back out onto the Rhine. It will meet us at the end of the day in Königswinter. Like most German cities, Cologne was heavily bombed during the Second World War. While most of the buildings sustained damage, a great many have been restored, such as the Great St. Martin Church and the Old City Hall that was built in the early 13th century. But Cologne is most famous for its cathedral, which shares the title of most visited monument in Germany with the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. The cathedral has an interesting story behind it. In 1164, Emperor Frederick Barbarossa brought the relics of the three kings from Milan and offered them to the city of Cologne, transforming it immediately into a major pilgrimage site. To ensure that the relics were properly housed, it was necessary to build a new cathedral. The construction started in 1248 and lasted over 600 years. The cathedral was finally completed in 1880 during the reign of Emperor Wilhelm I. The Cologne Cathedral is a flamboyant Gothic marvel, its two towers rising 157 meters into the sky. Its facade is adorned with innumerable statues. The cathedral is a work of art, evidence of the historical vitality of Christianity in Germany. The structure can accommodate up to 20,000 people in its majestic interior, and the atmosphere in the nave is conducive to meditation and prayer. The stained glass windows date back to the 16th century, and numerous works of religious art can be found along the cathedral aisles. Over 6.5 million visitors come to Cologne each year to see the cathedral, and today we're pleased to count ourselves among them. We take the highway out of Cologne, heading for the small town of Königswinter on the eastern bank of the Rhine. Back on our ship, we continue south to our next port of call, Koblenz. After such a rainy morning, the hearty Alsatian fare is much appreciated. On the menu, sauerkraut with smoked pork, Strasbourg and Montbéliard sausages, followed by Munster cheese with a savory cumin pastry, and, for dessert, strawberry sorbet. The meal is accompanied by a selection of excellent Alsatian wines. Between Königswinter and Koblenz, the landscape begins to change. We've left the Ruhr Plains behind and enter the region of North Rhine-Westphalia. The banks become steeper and we see acres of grapevines. We're navigating through a famous wine region called Mittelrhein, which produces Riesling, Pinot Blanc, Noir, and Grigio, Dornfelder, Sylvaner, and many other sparkling wines. As the afternoon draws to a close, we arrive in Koblenz, where we're greeted by the immense statue of Emperor Wilhelm I, who unified the German Empire in the 19th century. The symbolic monument was bombed during the Second World War, then reconstructed in 1993. Located at the convergence of the Rhine and the Moselle rivers, Koblenz is one of the oldest cities in Germany. It contains traces of the Roman occupation dating back over 2,000 years. With glorious churches overlooking its maze of narrow streets and charming squares, Koblenz has an extremely rich architectural heritage. Because the city changed hands several times between the French and German empires, influences from both cultures are in evidence. We spend a delightful evening exploring the streets of the historic city center. It's a lively area with plenty of small pubs that are glad to welcome us in for a glass of some of the region's excellent wines. We'll continue our cruise on the romantic Rhine after the break. It's 5:30 in the morning on the docks of Koblenz in Germany. The crew of the Lafayette is already hard at work, preparing to raise the anchor. Today, we'll continue our adventure on the Rhine River. Our next stop will be in Mainz, but before we arrive, we'll navigate through one of the most beautiful sections of this fascinating river, referred to as the Romantic Rhine. In the 65 kilometers that separate Koblenz and Bingen, the river flows through some breathtaking scenery that has been the inspiration for many legends and fairy tales. The Rhine has always been a major European transportation avenue. In the Middle Ages, castles were built on its banks to protect the merchant ships from the pirates that infested the region and to charge them safe passage tolls. Many of the fortresses have crumbled into ruin today, but some have been magnificently restored, like the Marksburg Castle and the Katz Castle in St. Goarshausen. We understand why this part of the Rhine inspired so many stories and legends. The river carves its way through the steep mountains that give the valley a mysterious and enchanting feel, perfect for a story setting. As the villages don't have space to grow any larger, many of them look just the same as they did through the ages. The region's scenery provides us with a striking contrast from the landscapes we've seen over the last few days. After a few hours spent navigating through the romantic Rhine, we arrive in Mainz, capital of the Rhineland-Palatinate region. It's both an industrial center and a university town, and it houses the headquarters of several major German media companies. Like all the cities that were devastated by World War II bombing, Mainz is made up of a sometimes surprising mix of modern buildings and historical facades that were reconstructed or spared. This is the birthplace of Johannes Gutenberg, the inventor of the printing press, and we're excited to visit the museum that bears his name. In the 15th century, Johannes Gutenberg developed a printing system that used movable type. It was a revolutionary innovation, considered to be one of the most important inventions of the second millennium. The museum tells the story of the printed word, depicting the evolution of printing techniques and presses. The museum emphasizes public education, and its collection is aimed at visitors of all ages. A museum employee guides us through every step required to print a page of the famous Gutenberg Bible. In the age of computers and laser printers, it is fascinating to see how printing a single page could be such a huge amount of work. Mainz is home to many churches, but St. Martin's Cathedral is the largest in the city. With its 6 bell towers, it's a masterpiece of Romanesque architecture, with Gothic and Baroque elements as well. It's a cathedral with a tumultuous past. It has suffered damage from 7 different fires since its construction in the early 11th century. And yet the bombs of World War II left the building unscathed, despite the fact that 80% of the city was demolished. This is where Emperor Frederick Barbarossa began the Third Crusade to the Holy Land, and for centuries it was the center of the Holy Roman German Empire. Not far from the cathedral, a statue of Saint Boniface keeps watch over the market square. It's a beautiful gathering place, lined with impeccably restored Baroque houses. Once a week, the square fills with tables for farmers and merchants selling fresh produce and local delicacies. After our refreshing stroll through the streets of Mainz, we head back to the Lafayette, grateful for a refreshing aperitif before supper. The captain signals the cast-off, and our ship moves gracefully away from the dock to continue on its way up the Rhine. After freshening up in our cabins, the passengers head down to the dining room. We'll spend the night navigating toward France before stopping tomorrow morning at the port of Strasbourg. On board the Lafayette, we're heading up the Rhine on a cruise from Amsterdam to Lake Constance. After a night on the river in the grand comfort of our cabins, we're now crossing the Alsace Plain on our way to Strasbourg. Welcome to Eastern France, to a city with a truly extraordinary past. Since Roman times, Strasbourg has been at the crossroads of the major European trade routes. The main land routes converge here, and the city is built right on the Rhine, a major transportation waterway. Strasbourg was one of the first French cities to completely ban motor vehicle traffic in its downtown core, which is why it's such a great place to walk. We start our visit in Petite France, a historical district that draws its name from the 15th century hospital where patients were treated for syphilis, which at the time was known as the French disease. We take in the majestic timber frame houses that are so typical of Alsace, crossing picturesque canals and narrow streets with descriptive names like Lacemaker Street and Tanner Alley. This was once a district of artisans, merchants, and middle-class families, but it tumbled into poverty and disrepair before being renovated in the 1970s. From Petite France, we walk toward the city center, dominated by its splendid cathedral. In Place Gutenberg, a statue plaque tells us that while the famous printer was born in Mainz, he was living in Strasbourg when he invented the printing press. Notre Dame de Strasbourg has always been considered one of the most beautiful cathedrals in Europe. A masterpiece of flamboyant Gothic style, its stone carvings reach into the sky, as delicate as lace. Construction began in the 13th century, and while the building was officially completed in 1876, it requires consistent maintenance. A foundation called the Companions of the Cathedral are permanently in charge of maintenance. Any red sandstone blocks or sculptures that sustain damage are removed and replaced using the same techniques as those used by the original builders. Thanks to these workers, who are obviously not afraid of heights, the Strasbourg Cathedral remains one of the most spectacular religious structures in the world. In the area around the cathedral, the cobbled streets are lined with centuries-old houses that are a constant reminder of the duality of Strasbourg's heritage. Architectural, cultural, and culinary influences from both France and Germany are in evidence, and after the Second World War, the city emerged as a symbol of French-German reconciliation. In 1949, Strasbourg was chosen as a capital of Europe, and it hosts some major EU institutions, including the Council of Europe and the Court of Human Rights. Back on the ship, we are heading for our next port of call, Breisach, a German town about 70 kilometers south of Strasbourg. The afternoon is spent navigating smoothly down the Rhine and taking advantage of the services offered on board. Today, the captain invites us up to the wheelhouse. We get to chatting about the fascinating profession of ship's captain, which brings him all over Europe. The Lafayette continues up the river between Vosges and the Black Forest, which we will explore tomorrow. At the end of the day, the passengers get ready for the traditional gala evening of the cruise. On the program, an aperitif, thank you speeches from the staff, and group photos. In the main dining room on the upper deck, the mood is festive. Once again, the kitchen staff has outdone themselves, preparing a meal that we won't soon forget. Since our departure from Amsterdam, we've had some wonderful experiences, and tonight promises to be exceptional. Tomorrow, we'll head off to explore the Black Forest and pay a visit to a very unique museum before taking a tour on the TDZ. This morning, we leave the Lafayette behind to visit the small town of Gutach in the Black Forest. The forest earned its name in Roman times when the coniferous trees were reputed to be so dense that they blocked out the sun's rays. It is also the setting of several well-known fairy tales, including Hansel and Gretel, Sleeping Beauty, and Little Red Riding Hood. We're expected at the Black Forest Open Air Museum, located at the Volksbauernhof farm. It's a unique museum that plunges us 400 years into the past. Originally, the Volksbauernhof farmhouse stood alone in the middle of a field. Over time, various buildings from throughout the Black Forest were moved to the site to create a heritage village. Today, the museum consists of 6 farmhouses and over 15 outbuildings, including a grain mill, a sawmill, barns, stables, granaries, an oil press, and a chapel. Each of the museum's buildings is entirely functional, and guides are present on the site to tell guests about how life used to be. Various activities are organized at the museum for both adults and kids. There's an on-site playground for the children, and artisans are invited to give workshops to visitors, teaching skills like wood carving and basket making. The Black Forest Open Air Museum gives visitors a chance to learn more about daily life in a small German town 400 years ago. No detail is overlooked. There are examples of tools, dishes, and clothing from the period. It's a great way to preserve the cultural heritage of a region while simultaneously sharing it with visitors from all around the world. But now, it's time to focus on the gastronomic heritage of the Black Forest, around a table of the museum restaurant. We leave Gutach and drive on, this time heading 50 kilometers south. Next stop, the TTZ, one of the most beautiful lakes in the region. 2 kilometers long and 1 kilometer wide, the TTZ was formed by glaciers, which pushed up the ridges that are now the lake shores. The lake takes its name from Roman Emperor Titus, who camped on its banks in the 1st century. Today, it is a popular vacation spot that attracts visitors from far and wide, when it's not raining too hard. As it is one of Europe's cleanest lakes, aquatic activities are extremely popular, and people come to sail, swim, and ride pedal boats. All sorts of vessels crisscross the Tatizzi, giving passengers a chance to discover the region's unique geography. Although the weather is somewhat uncooperative today, the lake is stunningly beautiful, which gives a certain charm to even a rainy boat ride. There's a local legend that brings an aura of mystery to the Tatizzi. Around here, people say that an underwater city lies on the bottom of the lake. Of course, no one has ever dared to dive down and check, so no one knows for sure. Before getting back on the road, we decide to stop at a souvenir shop to look over the local specialties, which include cherry brandy and cuckoo clocks. Contrary to popular belief, these clocks were not invented in Switzerland, but right here in the Black Forest. We head back to the ship at the end of a fabulous day of discoveries. We have some time to take it easy in our cabins before we sit down to indulge in another excellent meal. As has become the norm throughout the cruise, the mood is relaxed and the passengers are pampered by the onboard staff. We'll spend tonight navigating on the Rhine River. After passing Basel, we'll stop to admire one of the most breathtaking scenes on the river, the Rhine Falls, right after the break. It's the last day of our cruise on the romantic Rhine, taking us from Amsterdam to Lake Constance. Throughout the cruise, we've navigated through landscapes as varied as they are beautiful. But today, Mother Nature has a magnificent show in store for us at the Rhine Falls. At 23 meters high and 150 meters wide, the falls have an average flow of 750 cubic meters of water per second, gushing over the top with deafening speed. This is the largest waterfall in all of Europe. The falls were formed around 15,000 years ago by erosion of glacier sediment away from a solid limestone base. Looking at the falls inspires us to reflect on the incredible force of nature, and we can admire them from various points on both sides of the river. It's also possible to take a boat out to a rock that juts out from amid the roiling water. After our visit to the Rhine Falls, we'll continue up the river to Lake Constance, on the border between Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. Here at the foot of the Alps, Lake Constance is the third largest lake in Europe. It is known far and wide for the variety of aquatic activities on offer. This region is blessed with a particularly mild climate, allowing many species of Mediterranean flora to grow in the area. Close to the city of Konstanz on the German shore, Mainau Island attracts thousands of visitors each year to its luxurious flower gardens. It's the smallest island on the lake, but also the most popular, especially among plant and flower lovers. The park was designed in the 18th century and contains almost 500 species of trees from all over the world. Around each bend of the path is a riotous explosion of colors. It's a perfect place to walk and explore the grounds, and we come across a large number of sculptures and art installations. Each spring, the tropical greenhouse is filled with the delicate blossoms of orchids. These prized flowers are followed by the tulips, daffodils, and hyacinths. The butterfly house is one of the largest butterfly breeding sites in Germany. The insects fly free, adding their colors to those of the flowers. 80 different species of butterfly can be found here, to the great delight of our group's amateur photographers. Mainau Island often presents concerts of classical and contemporary music. Several festivals take place on the island every year, and art is exhibited in the magnificent 18th century Baroque castle. This utopian island is the last port of call on our romantic Rhine cruise. Over the past few days, we got to discover one of the great European waterways and explore several cities that have played key roles in the region's history.